So today we're going to talk to you about Agrom. Agrom is our company. There is a problem in developing countries where supply chains are basically dictated by middlemen. Middlemen basically have the access to information that is key to an efficient supply chain. We call this concept information poverty when you don't have access to this information. We have found a way through our company to basically open up the channels of information, thereby increasing agricultural and supply chain efficiency.
At present, many middlemen are capitalizing on this information disparity to accumulate most of the profits from the sale of agricultural goods. AgroArm aims to simplify the agricultural chain in order to give farmers access to final resellers and avoid the middlemen, therefore keeping more of the profits and enabling better sales.
So the way that we do this is that we incentivize the users to actually give us the data. We do this by basically telling them that they will be able to get better prices on their products. We're essentially crowdsourcing the data by doing this. This then redistributes this crowdsourced data to the farmers themselves. So the farmers are generating the data, and then they're also able to obtain that data that they've generated.
We're currently offering two products, one aimed at farmers and traders, and that is a trading platform which crowdsources the price and amount information and then enables farmers and traders to access the information in order to reach a fair price. Second one is a medicine platform which aggregates data from sale and from the trades in the trading platform and enables microeconomic planning for the government NGOs and research projects.
So what we have right here is an example of what we have running in Nigeria at this moment. This is some marketing material that helps explain what's going on and how you can use this on your cell phone by sending a text message. We have the first thing that they can do is get a price with Agrom. They text the price and the commodity that they want, and then we'll return a price to them. This helps them if they're going to work with a wholesaler. It helps them leverage that information for better negotiations. The other thing that they can do is actually search for partners on a platform. If they ask for a partner, if they're an Apple seller, you can say, this is the best Apple buyer in the region, and we can return the information on those Apple buyers to them if they want to work outside the wholesale system. The final thing that they can do is that if they're ready to harvest their crop, they can actually send a bid on their crop to our system, which will then be distributed to the buyers in their country, locally in their country.
As the data accumulates, this is an example of the management platform. As they accumulate data, it is displayed on the internet, online, and available to all the governments or other users. Over here you see the graph of recent prices. The users are able to drill down on different commodities, time intervals, and regions. And furthermore, they're able to conduct outreach to the farmers. They're able to send SMS or email to warn about emergencies or price spikes or pest problems and recommend solutions.
So we are happy with what we've accomplished so far in terms of the tools that we have. We do know that there are other things that we can do in the future with a big enough data set. So some of the things that we want to do in the future is predictive pricing, for instance. We know that with a large enough data set, we can actually begin to understand how the prices evolve over time, not just relying on futures markets, but actually seeing what this would look like over time in a real setting. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do once we get a big enough data set from this. The other thing is that we can actually start extrapolating trends on the actual production levels in a country. Many countries still have to import food, or sometimes they want to export, and they want to plan their cash flows based on that. And so with a big enough sample size, we can actually start to see what the production levels in a country at the macroeconomic level are.
And the way we operate is we recruit a user base which we use to source data, and as the data comes in, we accumulate it in the database. And then from the database, both individual users of the trade platform, which are farmers and traders, as well as governments, which use the management platform, can have access to the data and all the capabilities that it provides, including fairer prices and microeconomic planning. So far, we've developed partnerships with local SMS providers such as Kutumo and local governments in states and markets of interest.
So the way that we actually roll this out is something called the BOT model, build, operate, transfer. It's very in vogue right now to do something this way. Basically, we will be selling access and leasing access to the platform itself. We run it and we co-run it for 2 years while we can build up the statistical capabilities within these governments so that they understand what the actual capabilities of this data is. After 2 years, we assess if they have the capacity to run it, and then they can either choose to continue working with us or they can choose to run it themselves. We do envision this to be about a 2-year program with those governments.
So obviously our main impact is increasing farmer income. So we're interested in giving farmers a higher share of the income generated by the products, but at the same time we're able to enable governments to do better macroeconomic planning. We're able to monitor some pesticide and fertilizer use as well as land and water in some cases, and we're also able to advertise better technologies and promote more sustainable technologies, green engineering. Finally, we're able to conduct studies on the efficacy of certain interventions in different regions of the world, and due to our ability to aggregate this data, we can do so in a relatively scientific manner, and therefore solve a problem with data inequality and lack of understanding of efficient interventions.
So as I said, we're happy with the progress that we've made so far. The platform is online as a starter in Nigeria. It's also in South Africa for other reasons. But we do know that there are 2 main things that we have to look out for in the future, which is 1, intellectual property protection. Obviously, we're working in emerging markets. This is something that people can replicate very quickly. The other thing is that you need to have a critical mass of a market for a market to be valuable. So we need to make sure that we get enough users onto it. But we do think that we've solved those 2 problems by the BOT model. Basically, the government will be providing us with the user base. They'll be providing certain amounts of the users every month to us, where they're going out and registering users on our behalf. We'll also be co-marketing this platform and this project as well, because we don't want to have a single point of failure. So the way that we do this is we have a mix of different ways that we're going to obtain users. When you're working in emerging economies, especially in Nigeria, the educational level itself can be a problem. So we've looked at the mix of the most effective way to obtain users on it. You do have highly educated technical users that we can get through cheap internet advertising immediately. So we've already started to do that in the first place. The vast bulk of the people that would be benefiting from this platform are what we would consider functionally illiterate. So they can function in basic capacities in terms of technology, but they do need some prompting. So the best way to do that is through radio. Radio is very popular in Africa, especially in Nigeria, and we can actually get radio advertisements out there. Lastly, we have, for people that would not understand the platform without real interaction with a person that would be training on them, we do have the plans for kiosks that we were putting in strategic markets. These would be self-financed by actually supplying agricultural inputs of the kiosks as well. So a farmer would come in there, they would be registered, somebody would tell them what the problem is immediately, some issues with their farm, and then they could upsell the actual agricultural inputs to finance these kiosks as well.
Well, the way we roll it out is we first conduct several pilot projects in interstate Nigeria and Parana State, Brazil, where we recruit users with a variety of methods we discussed previously and assess the efficacy of recruitment and see what critical number of users we need in order to scale up to a national level. At the same time, we're rolling out an international trading platform through Rwanda, and this is actually the government of Rwanda approached us to help market non-perishable goods such as coffee to Western consumers, and where the government will actually provide the user base entirely, and they will ensure the compliance with international regulations and sanitation laws, and we will help them distribute those goods to others.
So this is an example of the rollout plan that we have to accomplish whenever we enter a new market. The most important things are obviously we need localization. So every time that we enter a market, we have to have an understanding of what's going on in the market, what are the different commodities actually called in the local languages, if we need to translate it to Brazilian, Portuguese, or to French, or other things. The localization takes a little bit of time, but it's not a problem at all. Assessing the marketing mix is another thing that needs to happen as well. So we need to understand, we have baseline data that helps us understand what the most positive mix is between radio, internet advertising, and various other things that we can do. the last thing that we need to do is a lot of governments do have some data that is useful at this point. And so we would actually integrate whatever data the government has at that point to give us kind of a head start on the actual program. So for instance, Nigeria has 14 million farmers that they've registered for subsidy programs. We would like to actually integrate those, and we could do that in about one day and get 14 million people on our database immediately. Generally speaking, we can get this platform up in about 8 weeks.
So the way we're planning to roll it out is first establish local trading platforms in Nigeria and Brazil and Africa and South America respectively, and at the same time we're running the pilot with Rwanda where we're trying to establish international markets for these non-perishable goods, and depending on the success of the trial, we'd like to combine the two platforms and allow farmers to participate in international trade by aggregating the products and having governments and us sell them.
So taking a step back from pilots, we do have long-term plans as well. Basically, when we assess a market, we need to look at two main factors, which is number one, the cell phone penetration rate, which is very important for this as a proxy for a lot of other things as well, and obviously the agricultural potential of that country. Institutional frameworks are of course of importance, but those are harder to quantify, and it's something that we need to do on a qualitative basis. Finally, I can give you an example. Botswana, for instance, has a high cell phone penetration rate, but it does not have a large amount of agriculture, so we couldn't do work in Botswana. On the opposite end, Ethiopia has a lot of agriculture, high value agriculture, but they do not have the cell phone penetration rate, so that's another country that we would not be able to work in. These are the countries that we think reasonably we could actually have a large impact in.
Good. And these are based on high agricultural prevalence and a lot of cell phone. So after we're planning to roll out in multiple markets, and we estimate that we can do expand to a new market once every year, every 6 months, and we do so do this efficiently by using a small team. Myself, I'm a PhD student at Yale School of Forestry, and I'm specialized in statistics and green engineering. And Tony.
Myself, I've been working with the Nigerian government as a project manager in the past, and I've been working with mostly agricultural infrastructure in these countries. As another point is obviously taking a step back, we know that on the BOT model, even though it is the safest model, that means that we will be losing a big portion of our revenue after 2 years. It's therefore important to diversify our revenue streams. We have multiple revenue streams so that once the user base is built up, we can still get revenue from the company basically by doing direct advertisement of agricultural inputs to the users themselves. So we would approach an agricultural supplier, say, would you like to advertise on our platform? We can tell you your exact customers that we'd like to get to. If you offer a discount, then people will be more willing to buy from you. And we do believe that marketing in the long run is more valuable than government income anyway.
Based on our previous pilot studies that we have done in Africa and Turkey, we have constructed a conservative estimate of revenue, and our break-even point at this time is 13 months from the first pilot. And at that time, that is the time we expect to have 89,000 users, which is the need to break even.
As Fyodor was just saying, we have several self-funded studies. Basically, we have a range of values that we use right now based on the studies that we've conducted on how feasible this is. One of the things that we need to do is find exact critical values for things like what is the critical market mass. That would help us establish exactly what that is. We know the range of values, but we don't have that exact number for a lot of these commodities. Finally, running these pilots as well will help us capitalize our company so that we can go from market to market based on the revenue and expand into these markets. Unfortunately, we don't have the capacity right now, financial capacity, to co-market the platform with these countries. So we do need money as well for the co-marketing of the platform.
Finally, we know that there are 2 possible prize awards that we can potentially win, so we kind of speculated, calculated what we could do with the money, and if with the $25,000 we can effectively run one pilot at a time with largely unpaid contributions from the current staff, and with a larger grant we're able to run multiple pilot projects simultaneously, and we're able to accelerate our development of predictive capabilities and basically online developments together with hiring someone to do more programs. And thank you very much, and we'll take your questions this time.
Hopefully you understand. most of all that. It's a lot to get through very quickly.
How many users do you have now?
As of right now, we have probably around 1,200 users, I believe.
How fast are they growing?
It depends on how much money we put into marketing. I can only say that the marketing cost, the cost per acquisition of user is about 3 cents, but that's for the internet users, which is a different class of users.
How much are they using the system today?
Actively, but not active enough that they do fall off over time, and so we need more users coming in that's falling off. We know what the drop-off rate is, and this is why you need to reach it for the mass. We have had trades happen on this platform, though.
Why are they falling off?
Anytime you have new technology, there's always going to be people that will fall off. Like they'll be registered once to it, they'll think about it, they may not be reminded of it. You're not building any brand awareness, and that's the biggest thing. So you need to have the critical market size that it's a useful tool that adds value to their lives. It's an unfortunate fact that you introduce new technology because you have a drop off rate.
People are often very excited about new technology, but if it doesn't affect you immediately, you're very likely to give up.
Which is why we need to cover it.
So if I'm one of those intermediate people who just displaced, what do you suppose I'm going to do about it?
Well, we're not necessarily saying that we're going to displace you. We do think that you need to reconfigure your business model, which
You're
is
going to take away my margin.
I'm going to take away some of your margin, which is unfortunate for some of these people, but the reality of the situation is that this is an antiquated model. And
But for good reason, though, because it actually employs a lot more people than your system would. What are you going to do about, and I know this is an open-ended question, but you've had to deal with this already, corruption, organized crime, cartels, gangs, and particularly families that are tied into these distribution systems in many of these countries, and they're very, very difficult to break apart. Let go and streamline it and make it more efficient. I know your systems are brilliantly conceived, but to actually employ them in some places, in those are pretty dicey places that you picked.
yes, of course. I'm going to unpack that one
You're
by
a good
one.
salesperson, I presume.
I hope so. I'm trying to. Basically, the first thing dealing with corruption, obviously we're dealing with governments that have a reputation for rough forms of business. Nigeria is a federal government. Actually, at the federal level and the state level, they all have their own commissioners of agriculture. The states that we've looked at, they're usually from the opposition party. I don't want to get too much into Nigerian politics, but usually they're from the opposition parties. They are a lot more reliable. The minister today of Nigeria, Adesina, is actually well known, I think, in agricultural circles now in Africa. That's like this. Adesina seems to be working in a very different way. We hope that that filters down, but personally, we know the laws about Foreign Corrupt Practice Act and things like that. I know the regulations, and there are ways to get things done. And all I can say is that we avoid it. You're liable to be arrested otherwise.
Sure, but don't you have a feeling that the farmer will eventually end up as the brunt of the frustration on the part of the intermediates that gets displaced?
No, we've heard that before. And that is something to be considered, but right now they're already feeling the brunt of the intermediaries that are extracting their capital. So you're saying what is worse is that maybe there's an acute problem to it, but a lot of these people, they can go into aftermarket value addition, like they can do things like continue doing the logistics service. Logistics service, I'm not saying that these people are useless, they are useful, they're just taking too much. They can still add value by things like adding the logistics, and they will have to.
What's going to stop them from doing too much?
That is a question though, I understand that concept.
Yeah.
I actually used to work for fair trade, so I'm very familiar with it, but the product still needs to be transported.
Right.
And those farmers are not going to be doing that, and currently it is the middlemen who are doing that. So are you proposing that the middlemen are still going to do the transport, or is there a different transfer option? Judges don't obsessed with transport.
They'd be able to, they would still be able to, they'll be able to still participate in the market because they can have access to the same database and therefore get access for bids that farmers are placing.
So the buyer would then get them the transport?
No. But they'll just have to compete with each other. So basically, what we're eliminating is that.
Bids on transport.
And final point. We only have 30 seconds. I'm sorry. As a final point, one of the things is that the money. Okay, sorry.
You're the last one.
To be fair, we have to let you go over a little bit to run off this.
All right, good, fine. One of the things is that the money coming in. Let's say that the worst case scenario, in like a place like East Africa, they can extract up to like 90%. You say that you work for fair trade, so you know that it's oppressive how much they take from it. If you get an actual fair trade in it, the amount of the logistics cost to privately sell it will be less than what you would get from the profit of it. You can still arrange your own private logistics. Yes, you're going to have somebody that will be very angry at you that you're now selling out around the back of it, but you're making an ethical question about, is it better to be trapped in a system where you're going to
No,
be...
I'm just wondering, very logistically.
Very logistically.
I mean, part of the reason those farmers are stuck selling those intermediaries
Yes,
is they haven't figured out transport.
We do have
So
other
now
things.
you're assuming they're going to figure that out somehow.
No, we don't think that they're going to figure it out. We think that most likely the buyer will propose to them that this is what it will be. Either they factor that into the bid that they're making, or they will say this is what it will cost. I'll send a truck, and you got to pay the driver. So it will be more buyer led because these are the people that understand it.
So instead of the trader can now not only buy from the person who
Attention,
monopoly,
agriculture
he can
innovation
compete with the
prize
other
student
traders
competitors,
for
please
their
head into the forum for
price,
announcements and
therefore they're also
instructions.
intertwined.
Judges, please take this time to deliberate. Thank
So we
you.
ran the numbers, and it does still make sense that they're able to basically arrange their own logistics, even if that's priced in, and they get profit from it.
Yeah.
Just one last question.
Yes.
So you gave an example really early on who's going to be managing this return of information. So as the text goes out for pricing, are you overseeing that and making sure that that's quality, or are you actually manually responding?
This is probably up your alley.
Okay.
So it's really a database that aggregates the information. So there's no really human component. So and then you can create dictionaries. So in order to manage the spellings in different languages, you can the user will also not receive a message. It will take a message back if they do not enter the proper information. Therefore, they're not charged, and they can they'll know that they've done something wrong.
In terms of the quality of data as well, you're taking sample size.
Right.
There's one bad or one ridiculous trade or something that somehow people ended up putting a bad
And
ending into it. It's
yeah.
sampled, so it's not one thing you
Statistically,
can't throw it
that's
off.
really easy to control.
Yeah.
What's your competition? I mean, this is not the first I've heard of farmers having cell
Yeah.
phones to get price data. So I'm just wondering,
The biggest one I would say is
there's a bunch
Soko.
out there, right?
Yeah, there's not too many. There's less than you would think. There's a lot of people that have kind of started up and tried these things. Soko is probably the biggest one. And I think that you're probably maybe familiar with Soko. One of the things about Soko is that still they're going out to the market and they're surveying the market. They send out 50 people or whatever in a country to survey the market data, manually plug it back into the system, which is then distributed. You have two problems with that, which is that number one, this is market from a market price. So that's not what the farmers will obtain. The second thing is that it's costing Soko a lot of money to charge these governments because they have to maintain a fleet of essentially agricultural extension workers, which the government should be doing, not be privatizing out to a separate company. Anyway, on top of that, it doesn't have the trade capacity. So we're actually getting this through. We're an agricultural management platform, but we're pretending to be a trade platform to get the data. Isoko does not allow trading. That's the bulk of our data is actually from the trading. Whereas Isoko is basically just saying, here's the data that we got from a survey, basically doing the same thing. And what if somebody writes it down bad on a survey? What if somebody gets lazy that day and then comes back?
From the point of scientific accuracy, surveys are always more problematic than something that people cannot invest in interest in.
So that's the biggest competition. There are similar ones. There's ones in India. India has one that's massive right now. That's a call center model. They have to do it as a call center because obviously the linguistics in that country is very difficult. But yeah, Isoko as well. They're starting to move into things like additional information, like educational information, health information, things like that. We can do that already. We already do that. I mean, our information platform allows anything that we put onto it. We can say, 1,000 farmers in this region suddenly have typhoid. We can say, look, this is what's going on, and send it out there. We're not limited in what we can do. So I wish I could talk to you more about competition.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things out, but we think that this is the best one.
Great.
Yeah, we get 5 more minutes with you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. We want to really thank you guys for all the support.
Thank you.
Great work. Great work.
Thank you.
No matter what you do.
Thanks for listening. Thank you.